Knowledge for Men, episode 113.
Welcome to knowledgeformen.com, where you're going to grow into the man you want to be. Your life will never be the same again. I can guarantee it.
The father of personal development, Jim Rohn, said it best. You are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with. And so I've created a mastermind community called the Lion's Den around this idea that if you are surrounded by high-performing people and you have consistent education and training, then you will succeed in life and as a man. Check out kfmlion.com to learn how the Lion's Den can take your life, relationships, and business to the next level. Again, that's kfmlion.com. All right, guys, I'm here with Tim Larkins, founder of Target Focused Training, a self-defense system for close combat training. He's the guy operators in the Navy SEALs and U.S. Special Forces call in behind the scenes to teach them what to do when it's kill or be killed. He also trains corporate and civilian clientele around the world. He's currently banned from the United Kingdom for teaching civilians on how to best defend themselves, so we'll definitely dive into that. And Tim is the author of How to Survive the Critical Most 5 Seconds of Your Life and Survive the Unthinkable. All right, Tim, happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
All right, so let's dive right in with a favorite success quote of yours, Tim, or something that you've lived by, and explain to the audience why you chose that.
The one I'm pretty much known for is violence is rarely the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer. And it pretty much defines kind of what my whole approach to the subject of violence and protecting yourself and self-protection is all about. And really, it's all about understanding that first part of the sentence, which is violence rarely being the answer. And especially, with some of the younger guys in your audience, that's a tough road, because a lot of times we want to respond to violence with violence in a situation that really doesn't warrant that. The second part of that statement, when it is the answer, it's the only answer, that's the statement that is probably the most controversial and the most misunderstood. It gets me sound bitten a lot to make it sound like I'm very much an extremist when it comes to using violence. But the rare instance where you're faced with imminent violence, the only tool that's going to get you out of that is violence. And that's just a fact. And so that pretty much sets up kind of the whole, my whole view on self-protection and how my career is pretty much played out.
Yeah, I agree. If someone is attacking you and you've done everything you possibly can, then meeting violence with violence is sometimes your last and only option. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's just it. Well, Tim, I'm really interested in how someone becomes a self-defense training expert for the most elite special forces in the world. So I want to hear this story. How do you get started with this? So go ahead and take the mic and share your story with my audience here.
Yeah, I was a Navy kid. I was born in Boston. My mom and dad's family is from Massachusetts. My mom's dad really was a big influence in my life as a little kid. He was a hardcore boxer. He was a South Boston guy, brought himself up by the bootstraps. First guy in the family kind of to go legit. But he felt it very important that myself and my young cousins understood how to protect ourselves, and just introduced us to boxing at a very early age. Probably the defining time I had with him, I think I was about six and a half years old, and he was teaching us about boxing. And he looked at us at one point and he said, "Now, boys, this is what happens when you're in the ring." He goes, "You pay attention to all these rules and you be a really good sportsman." And then he pointed out, it's really funny, we were downstairs in the basement, and he kind of pointed out to the window and outside in the street. He said, "But out there," he said, "if anybody tries to hurt you," he said, "this is what you do." And he basically just showed us very straightforward injuries to the human body that had nothing to do with sportsmanship, had nothing to do with anything other than survival. And it was, it really didn't sink in at that age. But what he was trying to tell me was there's a huge difference between a sporting event and protecting yourself on the street. What makes combat sports so great is exactly what makes them a disaster often if you try to use that approach on the street to protect yourself. And that was something I was introduced to very early in life. I was a Navy brat. We literally, my dad, we lived all over the United States. And I ended up at one point as a early teenager, I think I was about 12 years old, when I landed in Coronado, California at Navy housing. And my father he was a XO on a ship across the bay. but we were living in this Navy housing across from this, right across the freeway. And I saw this huge compound, and it had a huge obstacle course and all this crazy stuff. And I saw all these crazy guys just having to do all these amazing, physical feats. And I saw these instructors taking them through this training and just really torturing them. And as a young teenager, you'd ride your bike over there, and that was just pure entertainment to watch, this type of event going on. I had no idea at the time what I was watching was Navy SEAL training. And I literally lived right across the street from basic underwater demolition school. And over the next couple of years, I got to learn everything there was to know about the SEALs. And this is, in the late 70s, early 80s, when really not a lot was known. There's certainly not as popular as it was right now. But I couldn't believe there was a job out there that you got paid to basically dive, shoot, automatic weapons, jump out of airplanes, hang out in these cool looking uniforms, wear Varney sunglasses. It was just really, as a young kid, you just thought that was the ultimate. And so I just kind of put it in my head, that's what I wanted to do. My parents weren't really happy because the SEALs really weren't very popular in the Navy back then. They were kind of seen as a redheaded stepchild. And it wasn't a glamorous career. It wasn't a career where you could really go that far. But I was just sold. I was fascinated. I loved the guys that I met, and I just knew I wanted to do that. I got myself an ROTC scholarship. My dad was very big on saying, okay, you can do this, but you have to go through college first. So I did that. I think they were hoping college would get that out of my system. I used it just as a training ground to prepare myself physically and mentally for this. I was up against 275 guys who had qualified. So there are a lot more people that applied, but 275 guys applied for 2 slots that were available to go to SEAL school back then as officers. I was able to secure one of those spots. I was able to get one of those spots into the class.
Wow, those are, incredible odds right there. So, you must have done something that, put the odds in your favor. So what did you do?
Yeah, well, it would be a good thing for your listeners to know this, especially if they're younger guys. If it's something that you really want, don't ever leave anything on the table. And on the application process, I knew that, I was up against 275 guys. We all looked the same on paper. We all wanted it. I was trying to think to myself, geez, what can I do? And I started talking to my friends and some of the guys that were SEALs that I knew. And they kept telling me, they said, you should go to Washington, D.C., and you should go to the detailer's office. The detailer is the guy that actually, makes the final decision when he goes through that. And he was a commander at the time. And the gateway keeper was the secretary, Margaret. And at the time, Margaret had been there 25 years. She had been the secretary to the detailer, various detailers that had come through in the SEAL teams. Basically, the gateway was Margaret. And if you could get past Margaret, you had a chance of meeting detailer. I wasn't supposed to be able to do this. I was just a young midshipman from USC who had, I was just a kid with no background, but I was tenacious. I had a buddy that was going to school out in D.C. I went and stayed at his place, and I camped outside the office, literally in my uniform, for 3 days. They wouldn't see me for 3 days. I literally sat there 8 hours a day, waited till he came in, waited till he left, got ignored for 3 days. And of course, I had been talking to Margaret prior to this, and she was watching me the whole time, and she knew I was working her. I sent her flowers. I did the whole thing, trying to get in. And on the 4th day, a kid that was working for me, a lieutenant, came by and he said to me, hey, Commander Golay will see you for 5 minutes. So I walked in there and he looked at me and he said, okay. He goes, midshipman, he goes, you've been hanging out. I want you out of my office. Why are you here? And so I basically took that time. I said, sir, I know you have a lot of decisions to make. I also realize that there's a high attrition rate. And I said, I will tell you, I won't quit. I'm not going to be one of these guys that's going to quit. They're going to have to beat me. They're going to have to break me. I don't want you to waste your decision. And so I just want you to really consider me. And he goes, all right, midshipman, I heard you. You can leave now. Boom. I walk out of there. I figured I blew it, and I'm walking down this is at the Pentagon. I'm literally walking down the halls of the Pentagon. And that same Lieutenant JG who walked me in had to run down the hall. And he just looked at me and he goes, I just got to tell you, he said, nobody can believe that you waited 3 days outside of there. He goes, that tenacity alone. He said, just want to let you know, you had the slot after the second day. He goes, they've been talking about you the whole time.
Oh man.
And so it was that mental tenacity. And I don't often share that story. And, it's going that extra effort. One thing I knew by doing that was if I walked away, I know there was nothing else I could have done. I'd done everything physically. And my grades were good. Everything was as good as I could possibly get. The extra effort was that idea of actually tracking down who the decision maker was, getting in front of that person for 2 minutes and just saying, hey, here's who I am. And I went. Now, I'm setting all this up for a reason. It's not just the, glorification of the Tim Larkin story here. So I go to training. I get into training and I am killing it. I mean, I know everything about training at this point because as a kid, the team guys had told me, hey, this is where you hide food. Here's all the events. Here's how you train yourself. I knew the ins and outs. I knew exactly what to expect every step of the way. We won Hell Week, which is like the 6th week of training. My boat crew that I led, because I was an officer, we won Hell Week. And that means on the 5th day of Hell Week, you get secured a half day earlier because you've won all the events. And that's a huge victory. That's like a major thing for you to be able to do that, a milestone in training. During the second phase of training, I was doing great, no problems. Got through all the hard things, all the hard evolutions, the 5.5 mile swim, every physical challenge that was tough in the SEAL team's training, in the training portion, I killed. It was at a point, I was 3 weeks away from graduation. I was already slotted. They were starting to, tell us what teams were available. I was already the top guy. I was going to, at that point, I was pretty much a shoo-in for the anchor man, which is kind of like the number one guy in your class going in. I was going to have first selection of any of the teams that I wanted to go to, the SEAL teams. Back then, SEAL Team 4 was the team that was doing all the counter narcotics work. This is before the wars. This is in the late 80s. So I'm setting all this up to say, I was bigger, faster, stronger. I was arrogant. I knew everything. I was over prepared. There was nothing, nothing could beat me. Nobody could beat me as far as my will was concerned, my physical conditioning, any of that. 3 weeks prior, I'm doing a breath hold dive event where we're just kind of breath holding a little bit. I'm feeling a little bit of twinge in my ears, and I know I have to do a dive later on in the day, but it's just a recreational dive. It's not a big deal. I end up doing that dive later on in the day, and a little pressure wave comes through of underwater currents that are coming through. And there had been some guys doing explosions far, far away. It wasn't like, as close to explosion, but it created pressure waves in the, underwater pressure waves in the dive portion that I was doing. It came through and a wave hit my ear, kind of like it would be like, just getting hit with a little bit of underwater pressure of water hitting you. It's no big deal, like a current. It was enough to blow my eardrum severely, to the point to where I went into vertigo. I was underwater on a rebreather, which doesn't show bubbles or anything like that. And the only way I was able to get to the surface was I grabbed the tow line of the IBS up above, the boat up above, and I was able to pull myself up. As I'm pulling myself up, I felt I was pulling myself down at a 45 degree, because when you go into vertigo, when you burst your eardrum, all the semicircular fluid comes out of your canal, out of your semicircular canal, and you lose all sensation of up or down. You have no control over your body. When they pulled me up onto the boat, they said my head was slamming against the deck uncontrollably, and it took a while to stabilize me. That ended my career before it even started. That injury ended. It was the first time I was introduced to a vulnerability in the human body that I couldn't overcome by will. I couldn't gut it out. I couldn't do anything. It absolutely shut my body down, regardless of what I wanted to do. It was a seminal time in my life. I thought my life was over at that point, but it actually started the whole journey on this that really involves injury to the human body. It involves areas of the human body that can't take trauma, that will trump bigger, faster, and stronger, regardless of the guy's will, regardless of the guy's abilities or any of those other things. It absolutely starts to shut the body down. And I firsthand experienced that at the height of my physical prowess, and was absolutely humbled by injury. And it's kind of been this path that I've taken since then in the SEAL teams. As a officer, I couldn't become a SEAL officer, so they kept me in there as a intelligence officer. I went and got intelligence training, had a fascinating career doing special operations intelligence during a really interesting time. And one of the things that I got to got involved in was a program of looking at hand-to-hand combat training for the special operations community, because at that time, it was the time the Berlin Wall came down, and I was working at a command that I had no business being at. I was a very junior guy, but they put me there because they knew I knew enough about the community to where I could do a really good job as an intelligence officer and not take an active duty SEAL out of an active command. So that's the only reason they placed me there. So I was working with just these legends of the SEAL teams who were looking ahead to say, okay, what types of threats are going to be coming in the next 10, 15 years? What are I going to prepare for? And everybody predicted kind of what's going on today. Back then, we called it low intensity conflict, but basically it was this house to house fighting, low tech fighting, going in and putting hands on people. And that's what they were preparing for. And they realized that hand-to-hand combat, close-in combat, was going to be an integral part of the training. So they put together a cell of guys that went through. They had me come because I had a pretty strong martial arts background. And I was a young guy. And I think they just liked having me around because I was fun to train with. Had no experience, no reason to be there. But it was at that point that I found I was introduced to a system that had the beginnings of what now 25 years has evolved into target focused training. And it was a really just a crazy journey. The worst possible thing in the world happened to me as a young guy. And it absolutely was a turning point in my life that led me into a career and a life that I never could have imagined. And teaching people and all demographics of people, from high-end celebrities to the most elite units that you may or may not have heard of, and all those worlds that I always wanted to get into. I did it in a very different manner than I imagined at 21.
Man, just what an ironic situation where you were unstoppable in Navy SEAL training and you finally get to the end and then you get injured, ending your SEAL career before it even started. So I'm wondering, how long did that period last where you're kind of uncertain about your future, and like, how did you handle that? Like, how did you get through that period?
They kept me, I was kind of in limbo for about 6 months because they kept wanting to test me to see if there's any way my ears would heal up to the point to where I could dive again. And it just didn't happen. Back then they didn't have the technology. Today they actually have technology that they could have gone in and fixed my ears. But back then they didn't have the technology to be able to do that. So they kept me in because I was a really top performer, and they gave me every opportunity, but it just, my ears couldn't take the pressure. And that's when everybody kind of pulled in. They found this intelligence option for me. And it was a devastating time for me at that point. But what was interesting was, it's a guy in the SEAL teams that I really respected came up to me and looked at me and he said, now's the defining moment. He was an older guy at the time. Well, I laugh. He was probably 38, but to me, he was ancient back then, and, and he looked at me and he said, hey, he said, you're going in a different direction. He goes, the decisions you make now are going to have a huge point. He goes, how are you going to look at this? What are you going to do now? That's how you have to look at this. There's lots of opportunities here. You just have to find them. And it was a harsh thing for me to hear, because the only thing I wanted to do, of course, was be an active duty SEAL and lead a team and, do the counterterrorism options that I wanted. But that really sunk in. And when I just started, opening myself up to other opportunities and seeing what kind of skill sets I could apply, it was amazing how the doors opened for me. And that's led to a career that I never could have imagined what I'm doing today back then, that I would have access, that I'd be, in the circles that I'm in and training the groups that I'm training. I've done far more interesting work, I would say, than most of my contemporaries that I went through training with, as far as my opportunities to work in parts of the world that I think are extremely interesting, parts of the military and intelligence world that were open to me through this, training opportunity, being essentially a contractor, a military contractor, before like there were the Blackwaters or any of those agencies. We were doing that before any of that was really prevalent, and it just opened up some amazing doors that wouldn't have been open to me if I had just stayed pure military.
Yeah, it really does appear that way. I mean, you turned your greatest disaster into your greatest opportunity and completely reinvented what you were going to do with your life.
Yeah, it did, and it also it also taught me that seminal lesson. I mean, the really reason I said all that is true. That is very true, and there's a lot to probably learn from that as far as your own personal development stuff. The seminal thing for me, though, was the fact that I was bulletproof back then. I mean, I was I was just a machine as far as, my physical abilities and everything. And to have something happen to you at that age that absolutely sets you on your ass and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, there's an injury to your body that you lose control of yourself. You lose control of your body. I couldn't believe, it just was unbelievable to me because I'd taken hard shots before. I'd come back up. I'd done all that. I played a lot of different types of sports. I could gut out stuff. And when you find yourself that there's a big difference between pain and injury, and the fact that I've been able to apply that and help so many people when it comes to protecting themselves, not focus on the bigger, faster, stronger aspect of things, but focus on the fact that every human body has vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and it doesn't rely on you having to be bigger, faster, and stronger. And I go back to that event that, like you said, it was just a crushing event, a huge, failure in my plan that I had for myself. And yeah, it turned out to be not only led me on a much different path, but also gave me the kind of the focus of something that I can always go back to and relate to when I'm putting the material out. I tell people, I say, hey, this stuff works. Believe me, here's my story. Here's where it happened to me. And it's been interesting. It took me a long time to reconcile that. It probably took me about 10 years after that to really feel okay with it. It really bothered me for quite some time to see some of my friends go on and do some of the things they were able to do in the various SEAL teams that I wasn't able to participate in that aspect as far as the operations side of things.
Yeah, and now from this, you've developed your self-defense system, target-focused training, and I've written several books. But how can you explain what target-focused training is to the audience?
Yeah, it's really easy. Basically, I tell people all the time, the assumption that we have is when I train anybody is we're facing grievous bodily harm, imminent violence. We have to assume a couple of things, and just out of pure practicality, I always assume the threat's going to be bigger, faster, and stronger than me. I assume the threat's going to have weapons, going to carry weapons, and I assume there's going to be more than one, so multiple attackers, because that's just prevalent when you look at the real acts of violence. So knowing that, you have to sit there and say, okay, well, if my threat's going to be bigger, faster, and stronger, what is something that works on bigger, faster, and stronger people? And what you quickly find is you look, where can I get really good data on bigger, faster, stronger humans that have something happen to them and they can no longer function. And where you get the best data on that is sports injury data. And when you look at sports injury data, there's approximately 72 areas of the human body that keep coming up in those reports, those injuries. And those are areas of the human body. And some of those areas are bilateral. So, you have 2 collarbones, you have, say, 2 ears. So you take that, it's probably about 100, right around 120, 27, 30 targets that are on the human body, that when you put sufficient force into those areas of the human body just can't take that trauma. And you look at sports injury data because sports injury data is human beings colliding with human beings and human beings colliding with the planet. And those are forces that you and I can replicate. If you look at injury data that involves, like, say, car crashes or anything like that, well, that has forces that the human body can't generate against another human body. So we look specifically at sports injury data. That was the big thing. And then it's injuries that basically take the brain out of the equation. And the reason, your audience can figure that out, because anytime they've touched a hot surface, their hand immediately comes off. If you touch something, you don't hold it on there and look at it as your finger is burning and saying, oh, hey, this is hot, I better move it off the stove. You come flying off the stove and then you realize, oh, wow, I just touched a hot surface. The brain has nothing to do with that reflexive movement at that time. Your body's defense mechanism takes over and involuntarily moves the arm away from the stimulus and bypasses basically the brain. So even if I tried to will myself to keep, my hand on that hot surface at that time, my body would override it. Same thing if you step on a sharp object, your foot automatically comes up away from the nail that you just stepped on, and there's no involvement of your brain. So when you put injuries on the human body that have that type of a trauma effect, the guy's ability to think and move is gone, because the biggest threat that we have is another human being's active brain. So what I do is I provide all of my people with basically a roadmap of the human body, of basically where to put the trauma. Where do you put trauma when somebody's facing you? In certain self-defense, situations, people will always say, like, the eyes, the groin, and the throat. And yes, all three of those areas, you can get a result, and you can absolutely, get the type of trauma I'm talking about. But it's not just a simple answer. There's lots of areas of the human body that you can look at that give you these options to put an injury on the human body and take the brain out of the equation. And we've all experienced it. Like if you've ever been around little children, I have a couple of twin daughters right now. They're 18 months, and I have a 4-year-old boy. And little kids they'll throw their head back, hit you in the nose, poke you in the eye. I have an older son who, when he was younger, he was walking into a room. I think he was going to try to give me a hug. I was reading a magazine, walking around reading a magazine, going to another room, and he went to go give me a hug, but he tripped, and his little hands came up and just executed a perfect groin slap on me.
Oh, no.
And I was on the ground for 5 minutes, sucking my thumb, just sitting there, just waiting for it to happen. I'm a 235-pound close combat master instructor. I had been training at that time probably one of the most elite counter-terrorist teams that we were taking through the training, and I was taken out by a little 4-year-old who tripped over himself and slapped me in the groin. Now that was an accident, and we all know that if that 4-year-old and a 235-pound man had been put in a ring and the ref said go, we know how that would turn out. But if that little 4-year-old was allowed to get close enough to me and engage himself with his body weight, which he did, he was falling forward with his body weight and happened to slap me into the groin, he got a huge result. He got an injury. And that's essentially what I teach people to do, is the predator gives you an opportunity. They put something vulnerable close to you. The reason they do that is because they're bigger, faster, and stronger. They don't think you're a threat. They give you an opportunity. And I teach people how to exploit those opportunities.
So other than eyes, throat, and groin, what are the other areas that can be penetrated and that can cause that kind of damage?
Well, I'll just give you probably a better way to look at it. Is I had a client who he's getting into his Lexus. He had a long day. It was kind of lousy weather, and he's putting groceries into his Lexus. And as he's doing that, over the door comes a 45, and it put right at his temple. When he basically could look out of the corner of his eye, guess which 3 targets were all protected by the door?
Definitely his groin is covered, probably, and he's probably too far away to attack the eyes and the throat.
Yeah, none of those are available. But what was available was, he saw at the bottom, at the bottom of the door, he noticed the top of the guy's foot was right there, meaning his sneaker was right there. So this guy, who's, had only gone through a weekend course, recognized, top of the foot. He dropped down with his knee and did a knee drop on the top of the foot, broke the guy's foot. The guy went flying back, crashed himself into the door, dropped the gun. As he fell down, my client then pulled the leg out from under, where it was by the heel, braced the knee up against the bottom of the door, pulled up, and snapped the guy's leg. And this wasn't, this guy, the attacker was much bigger. He's about a 190-pound guy, and this guy was probably about 150 pounds, soaking wet. Not a, wildly conditioned guy, but he understood injury. So the top of the foot, which oftentimes, is kind of used as a joke in self-defense, kind of like, stomping on somebody's foot. He recognized that was a great starting point, meaning he could drop his knee on top of that, break the bones of the top of the foot, snap the tendon that is below the foot. At that point, that the way we arch up, there's a nice little tendon there that flattens out. Broke the structure of the foot, caused this guy to go into the reaction of that, the trauma reaction to that. As he reached down there, he had his first injury. He was able to easily pull the leg up under and then go to the knee joint, snap the knee joint. When he snapped the knee joint, the guy passed out, and he was out cold when the cops came. And they were able to take him away. But if this guy had only been trained in eyes, groin, and throat, he wouldn't have had, any options. So what I do is I take people through these areas of the human body, and I basically do it like firearms training. We basically start everybody off with all these various sight pictures of all the targets that we're talking about. I would go through a series of targets on the human body. I'd have a person lying on the ground, so you'd learn how to, strike these targets with somebody on the ground. I'd have them get up in another position, say all fours, and then a standing position. So you are going to be able to understand how to go after the human body from any one of these positions, meaning because we have no idea how violence is going to affect you. We don't know these canned scenarios that people train in all the time. That's not the way real violence happens. Real violence is random. And so the best way to train you is to just kind of give you all of the areas of the human body that get a result, and then give you various sight pictures and just, teach you how to strike those from 360 degrees. No matter where you are, no matter what your position is, you understand how to get into the human body and get a result.
Wow. So that client probably contacted you like right after the event, just like either email, phone call, or just let you know that your training saved his life. And how does that feel?
Well, it just happened 3 weeks ago. I just had a woman who attended a weekend course. And again, she was somebody that, I can never pick out who this is going to happen to. She would have been one person that I just, I would not have thought this would have happened. But she was going to her parking, going to her car in a parking lot, and a guy tried to abduct her, tried to literally lift her up and bring her into his van. And when he snatched her up, at the point, her first thought, a lot of the training kicked in. She is, she's a concealed carry person. She had her gun on her, but she said the first thing that tripped into her mind as she got picked up was, she said, "It's not in my hand, so it's not my primary weapon." Meaning she realized if she wasted time at that point trying to dig out her gun, she could be killed. This guy could have her into the van at that point. So she looked at her opportunities. She was able to get into an injury, and she was able to take her elbow. She got her elbow free, and she elbowed him into the temple, and then she slammed him in the groin, and then she slammed his head into the concrete. And this guy was a much bigger guy. At the point where she was going to do one more strike, which possibly could have been fatal, she recognized that the guy was non-functional. She called the police. The police came quickly because it was in a pretty controlled area. The guy got up at one point. He started to regain consciousness, and he was trying to ask for help. He was trying to say that she attacked him. It was pretty funny. So the cops got him, secured him. The security cameras show how he was trailing around, looking, kept his car idling, running, how he approached her. It was all caught on security camera. The one thing the police said to her was, "Hey, you had a gun. How come you didn't shoot him?" And her whole thing was, she said, "I didn't have time to get to my gun. I realized if I tried to waste time getting to my gun at this point, I never would have been able to protect myself the way I did. He would have, he was bigger, faster, stronger. He had the jump on me. I had to injure him." And so that to me was really, there were so many things that came back to us. This is somebody who only had a weekend course, because the biggest lie out there is that it takes years and years to be able to be effective with the tool of violence, which is just not the case. I have to remind people all the time, the best people in the world at killing other human beings, murdering other human beings with their bare hands, have zero training in combat sports and martial arts. They all reside in our prison systems, and they're not pleasant individuals, but they are not trained individuals. They're just extremely good at breaking things on the human body. They understand intent. They understand how to do damage to somebody. This is a very simple, straightforward skill set that I can teach anybody, and we're all already pre-programmed to know how to do this.
Wow, that's just incredible to give someone the skills to, and then they use the skills to save themselves, defend themselves, and then you get to hear about those stories. So it's like you're doing incredible work there. So now, Tim, let's go into the knowledge round. I'm gonna ask you some rapid fire questions. So are you ready for the knowledge round, Tim?
I'm ready.
Do you feel stuck, alone, or like you're not getting the type of results you think you deserve? You put in all the hard work in your life, relationships, and business, but things just aren't getting any better? I've been there. That's how I started. That's where I was. I kept trying and trying to improve my life, but nothing just seemed to give. I started to think that personal development was a joke. I felt like every month I was in the same place I was the previous month. But then I found something that just worked. I grew, my business grew, my relationships flourished, and everything around me just started to click. People started respecting me more, and I finally felt like I was becoming the man I wanted to be. I created a program to help guys get the same results in their life. Check out kfmline.com to learn how the Lion's Den can radically transform your life. Again, that's kfmline.com.
Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
All right, and Tim, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of their purpose, like what they should do?
Stop focusing on yourself. Find somewhere where you can help somebody else in an area that you're interested in. So if you have an interest in sports training, or you have an interest in, anything, volunteer. Go, there's no reason that you can't find a way to get involved. Oftentimes people just put these really weird barriers in front of themselves. If you focus on yourself, you're never going to get anywhere as far as feeling sorry for yourself. I don't have this opportunity. I don't have that opportunity. You have to be outward focused, and you have to be focused on helping somebody else get a result. So if I have somebody that I'm interested in working with because I want to learn how to do their job, or I admire the way they do, are you willing to do the grunt work that will help them? Are you willing to do things that will, let them, get better at what they do? And are you willing to do a bit of an apprenticeship? Are you going to be humble enough to do that? It's amazing. I basically learned for 10 years underneath the guy that was my original instructor, helping him out. And that was the most valuable learning time ever. And it wasn't focused on making money. It wasn't focused on anything other than just mastering my skills, something that I was really into at that time. You have to find something that, yes, you're passionate about, but also that you understand that in order to get there, you have to build your skill sets and find a way to do that. But most people, I find, when they're feeling in the way that you're talking about, it's this inward, just negative focus on themselves, just holds them back. It's just really sad.
Yeah, definitely. And Tim, what was holding you back from becoming the man you are now today?
I think probably at one point in my career, when I started this out, I was with somebody who was, the guy had an amazing combat record. He had the story. He was the teacher. And I was kind of the behind the scenes guy. I was a really good instructor, but I wasn't a Vietnam vet. I wasn't a tunnel rat. I wasn't from the really elite combat unit that this guy was from. He was kind of leading the charge, and that was it. And I thought for years that was the most important thing, was that, you needed to have the story. You needed to be the guy. And I never saw myself as being that person. And when he left, when he, just decided not to do this anymore for personal reasons, and I was asked to go on, I put all these barriers in front of me thinking I'm not the guy. But what I realized was the reason people responded, the one thing that I understood was it was not about me. It was really about the results I get for the client. And I surrounded myself with, these amazing instructors who not only are really competent, but the unique skill set that we all have is we want the client to be better than we were every step of the way. And we wanted to keep improving our methods to get better results. And by focusing on that, I didn't need to have the really sexy combat story. My credentials speak for themselves. I've worked with everybody. But the way and the attitude that really got me going was the fact that the only thing that counted to me was, say, this next seminar. I got a seminar coming up this weekend. So my resume gets thrown in the shredder this weekend. The only thing that's going to count this weekend is what result can I get in the next 2 days with these people. And if I can't get them the results that they deserve, anything I've done before doesn't matter. So it's that idea of getting out of yourself and focusing on getting others where they need to be. And that was probably it. I had all these internal monologues going on that I couldn't be the guy. I'm not the right background. I don't have this. I don't have that. And it was all just ridiculous. I actually had 10 times the success I ever experienced under the old program with target focused training because I completely focused on getting the clients the results that they needed.
Yeah, and that would apply to any type of coach or instructor that's, kind of thinking they're not ready because they don't have the right credentials, they don't have this, they don't have that, just like you alluded to. But if you can get the results the person is looking for, your client, then that's really all that matters, because that's all that they want.
Well, you look at anybody. If you look at if you're looking for, down that road, most sports guys, really good trainers and stuff, it wasn't necessarily a credential. It was a result that they got. You know, you look at Freddie Roach and what he put in. He put in a lot of time. He did a lot of great things. But Freddie Roach was really basically unknown. It was the results that he started getting for clients by putting it out that made him the incredible guy that he is today, and his methodologies. And a lot of the top guys that I know right now, they were so focused on doing something for their client, and then their client went around and told everybody, hey, you know, I was working with this guy and I got this result. It was the same thing with me. I started working with a lot of groups. They appreciated the old instructor that I had, you know, the guy that taught me, but they really liked my methods of approach, because I really focused on making sure that the client got it. And all of a sudden I ended up getting this reputation, and I started building my own reputation, and I already had credentialing, but I just didn't think it was enough. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with guys. Just keep focusing on the work, and focus on just making those incremental improvements. If I look back to some of my original products that I did literally 15 years ago, I cringe when I look at how I used to train people, even though back then it was state of the art. But it's all the incremental approaches and changes that we've done to our methodologies over the years that I can literally categorize and see and go, wow, hey, I'm not that same guy that I was 15 years ago. I've actually evolved a lot because I want my clients to be better.
Yeah, that's just so powerful. I love that. And now, Tim, can you name someone who's been a mentor in your life, someone who's been like a role model, and you know, how have they impacted your life? Was there ever a moment that was really impactful for you?
I've been extremely fortunate to have a lot of great people in my life that have helped me out. My grandfather was huge. My grandfather was in more ways than he will ever know, kind of taught me what it was like to really, you know, be a man. Just the basics. He taught me really what it's like. He spent time with me as a little kid. And I really made sure that with my sons and with my daughters now, that at those little ages that you have a huge opportunity with small children to lay in really good foundations and really good values and skill sets. And, you know, my grandfather, without really even knowing it, you know, did that for me. So he was probably my first one. Professionally, I've had amazing guys that have really steered me in the right way. One guy in the SEAL teams, I was this motivated, crazy kid that just, I was, you know, they put you somewhere right before you go into SEAL training. And so they put me to this command. It was a special boat command. And my CO there just loved me. He was a SEAL, and he could see I was just this eager kid, couldn't wait to get into it. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, Timmy, he goes, you just can't wait to get over to training, can you? I go, no, sir. He goes, and you just want to get to the teams, don't you? I said, yes, sir, I do. He goes, you just want to get your platoon and you just want to get out there. You just want to go kill communists, right? Because back then, of course, it was a big Red Scare, and that's what we were all talking about. And, yes, sir. You know, I'm foaming at the mouth, basically. And he goes, good. He goes, but you got to do me a favor. And I said, what's that, sir? He said, when you do that, he said, I want you to plan the mission in such a way that all you and all your men are going to be able to sneak over there. You're going to find whoever your target is. You're going to shoot him in the back of the head, and you're going to be back at base having a beer before they ever know you were there. And I just look back, and this is the height of Rambo and everything. I'm going, wait a minute, what about Blazes of Glory? What about going in? What about, you know, being tougher than anybody else and shooting it out with everybody, you know? And he just sat there, and his whole thing was, he goes, your job is to get all your people over there and all your people back. And that's the most important thing. And your tactics need to be such that you get the result, you know, and you come back. And it was just a jarring thing as a young kid to go, wow, this is what it's all about. I have this fantasy of what I think I'm doing. And here's a guy who comes from a seasoned operator, did a lot of black ops at that time, really well respected in the community. And he just basically told me, no, this is what it is. And this is how you operate. And this is how you're professional. It's your job to take care of these people. And I kind of went into that, and I think that's why my guys did so well in training. And then later on, even in my intelligence career, leading people and doing things, I always kept that in the back of my mind, that there's a fantasy of what your job is, and then there's a reality of what you have to get done and how you take care of people. He taught me a really, really good lesson. They have discipline sessions in the Navy, and it's called non-judicial punishment, captain's mass. And basically, if you screw up, you go in front of the captain, and he issues a punishment to you. And so I remember sitting there one day, and he made me come to captain's mass. He wanted me to watch it. And he had a large mirror in front of the person. And it was really weird. He had one guy holding the mirror, and he would make whoever was coming up for captain's mass stand literally at attention and look at the mirror. And he made a statement to them. He said, I need you to look in that mirror, because while you're hearing your punishment, while you're hearing about what you did and why you're here, you're going to be looking for somebody to blame. You're going to be pissed off at somebody else. And I want to provide for you that person. So you're going to look in that mirror, and every time you're looking for somebody to blame, that's the person that you need to look at. And it had an amazing effect on these guys. He was really known for his captain's mass because he was an incredibly fair guy, but he also just was huge on personal responsibility. And it was such a visual representation of that, because guys would do these stupid things that would bring them in front of the captain. And I thought it was probably one of the greatest learning lessons I've ever seen in my life, was just this guy having to sit there while his punishment's being doled out and look at himself in a mirror. It was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, because immediately when you're being punished, you start thinking of someone else to blame, but you got that mirror right in front of you, so it's like you're the one to blame. It's like taking responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Tim, what are your 3 most influential books, and explain why?
Okay, so I think probably as a general, a book I love to give out is a really good friend of mine. His name is Steven Pressfield, and he's known for like Gates of Fire, but the book that I give to everybody is called The War on Art. And anybody that's out there that is struggling with finding your purpose, with getting on with what you want to do. Maybe you want to become a writer. Maybe you want to write that screenplay. Maybe you want to start your first business or something like that. And you got all these reasons why you don't do it. This is a short book. The reason I recommend The War of Art is because at any stage of your life, you will find a reason to not do something that's going to lead to your full potential. And I've never seen anybody that can put it out in such a concise, clean format, and it's just such great living advice for anybody. And what's so great about Steve Pressfield is he doesn't come at it from a preachy standpoint. He comes at it from very straightforward, here's how I screwed up, here's how I did it in my life. And that to me is just a great book to give to anybody at really any age. But essentially, the younger the person, the better. Another book that I recommend all the time is How to Be Rich by Felix Dennis. And it is probably a business book, but also it will a lot of people really get focused in on money and making money, especially young guys. And here's a guy who's worth, hundreds of millions of dollars. He's a publisher. He's a very, very funny guy. It's a funny book, but he really lays it out for you. He says, okay, you want to be rich. You want to be this guy that makes hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Here's how it really is. This is what it takes. Here's what happens to friendships. Here's what happens to your relationships. Here's the type of mindset you have to have. And here's the type of commitment you have to have. And I've never really seen a very positive book. It's a very funny book, but it also will really sit there and let you know that maybe money as a focus isn't necessarily the way to go. And it'll teach you a lot of great life events. Also, if you are a business person, it will teach you some great business skills and how to do things correctly, how to interact with people. So that's another, huge favorite book of mine to give people.
Yeah, both really, really good books, you guys. And you can pick up one of those books for free if you haven't already. If you go to kfmbook.com, you can get a free audiobook from Audible. If you go to kfmbook.com and use that link, you can get one of those books for free in audio format. So now, Tim, I have a scenario here for you. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell him to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
Okay. The first thing I would tell him is focus on passion, focus on my passion, on what you want to do. Don't worry. Don't get dissuaded from your gut, what you want to work on. Number 2, don't waste time being a white knight, don't waste time on bad relationships. Bad relationships have sucked up way more time in my life than anything else, prevented me from things. And that's probably the two things that I really want to get across to him in 60 seconds, if he'd even listen to me.
Yeah, right. Oh, what did you mean by white knight? Like, can you elaborate on that?
I think guys, young guys especially, we have a tendency to, if you're a good guy, you have a tendency to sometimes take on really destructive relationships, meaning, women in your life. If you're a heterosexual male, it would be a woman in your life that is a lot of drama, that takes you off your course, that keeps you from going after your pursuit. I'm not broad brushing all these women, but a lot of times guys pick the wrong mate, the wrong person, who ends up just wasting years of precious time when you could be developing yourself and really getting ahead with whatever really drives you. And so if you don't have a partner that is helping you get where you want to go, that's a huge red flag. And that's the number one thing I pass on to a lot of young guys and young girls is just don't waste time with the wrong person. Don't try to change somebody. Don't try to save somebody from themselves, because there are a lot of time vampires out there that'll just really drag you down. It's really the first rule of life saving. When you learn in swimming, if you go through life saving, the first thing they teach you is if a drowning person, you can help a drowning person until they jump on top of you and try to pull you under. And as soon as they try to pull you under, you need to push them away, because you can't save anybody if you get drowned as well. And that's a really good life skill to just understand. Toxic relationships can absolutely just devastate you time-wise.
Yeah, I mean, that's just so huge. I mean, right now, I know someone listening, their life was just changed just by listening to what you just said there. I mean, men need to hear that. It's like there are just some relationships that you have to let go, and this person is a vampire. Unfortunately, they're going to drown you, and so you have to value your time and your own self-worth. So, is there anything that you tell yourself not to do? Anything else?
Not to do. I think that's a really hard one, because well, the white knight's a big one, because there's no positive to that. Whereas a lot of other mistakes I've made actually have ended up positive. I learned a lot from those. That one is not one worth learning anything from. It just wastes a lot of time.
Right. And Tim, do you have an underrated characteristic that if every person would work on this, they could see massive results in their life?
Yeah, it's going to sound so trite because everybody's talking about it, but I got to tell you, man, meditation. Just the skill of meditation is really something that if somebody would inculcate that into their life, and I'm not talking crazy meditation, I'm talking mindfulness. I'm talking about just your basic sitting with yourself and quieting your mind. If you want to take the transcendental approach of 2 times a day, 20 minutes a day, that's fine. It's worked for a lot of people. But even just forcing yourself and sit with yourself for 10 minutes with no agenda other than to just follow your breath. As esoteric, as crazy as it sounds, just about every successful person that I know that has reached the peak creativity and done everything has some form of meditation in their life. And they rarely talk about it because, again, you don't want to give people the wrong impression like it's some esoteric, or religious experience. It is probably the thing that throughout my life has got me through some of my biggest challenges and stuff. It's that mindfulness time that I put in where I let my mind just kind of empty itself out and go in has been my biggest boost of creativity. It's the hardest thing in the world to do because it's the easiest thing in the world to blow off. It's the easiest thing to say, I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. I won't do it. There's something more productive that I have to do right now. And quite honestly, it's when I don't meditate, when I don't have that as a regular practice, that I get into my biggest slumps.
Yeah, I mean, you said everyone's talking about it, but everyone's talking about it for a reason, and that's because it does provide some really good results.
Yeah, it's the application. I mean, everything is about that's the hard. It's doing the work that's tough. In anything that we're talking about right now, it's one thing. It's kind of like talking about swimming without ever jumping in the pool. You have to jump in. You have to have that uncomfortableness. And probably the other thing I'd say along those lines for people is on everything too, on every skill set. And I'm going to say this to you. You got a good group of younger guys in your audience as well. As we get older, man, we're less risk takers. We don't learn new things, and the reason we don't learn new things is because we're afraid to look bad. We think we have to be really good at stuff. And the one cool thing about having my kids, I'm older. I'm in my late 40s now,
and having young kids is watching them as they develop. They don't ever self-criticize. They get up, they wobble, they take a couple of steps, they fall over. Nobody's yelling at them like, yeah, you suck, you can't walk, But that's what we do to ourselves every time we learn a new skill set. If we're not perfect right away, we don't give ourselves permission to do things poorly. And to me, it's absolutely critical. I would absolutely challenge everybody in your audience right now to find some new physical skill set. It can be taking an art class. It can be learning to draw. It can be a sport. It can be some sort of an application, maybe dance, maybe something that's intimidated the hell out of you for life. I'm white, I can't dance. I have no moves, I have no rhythm or something like that. Take a dance class. Take something outside of your comfort zone. It will provide breakthroughs for you that are just unimaginable. I can't tell you how useful that is to learn a new physical skill set or mental skill set that is outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, I like the analogy of comparing it to a baby, how just, there's no judgment and you just get back up and keep moving. And I think if we all applied that, we could, we would get significantly better at what we wanted to do and achieve our goals. But now, Tim, looking at your life here, your journey and the things you've accomplished from when you were in Navy SEAL camp all the way to what you did with the intelligence and your career as a self-defense trainer, reflecting back and just kind of seeing the things you've done and accomplished, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
Really, it comes down to I take what I do, my work, extremely seriously. And, I'm very serious about my work. I'm very serious about making sure that I get results for people. But what's really kept me a really grounded, well-rounded person is the fact that I don't take myself seriously. I have very high expectations for myself that I don't transfer onto other people. My standards are not something that I expect everybody else to have. I also laugh at myself a lot, and I'm very self-deprecating because I realize that, we're all just humans. But when it applies to our work, we should be extremely serious about that. The problem I see is a lot of guys just don't have fun. They can't relax. They have to be that guy. If I had to walk around life being the badass, master close combat instructor and constantly being that guy that's on call and just all jacked up, ready to go all the time, I would just have a shit life. It just wouldn't be fun. I have those skill sets. If I need those, I know how to draw upon those. But you know what? I'm going to focus on having a great life. And I'm going to focus on having fun. And I just don't see enough people doing that. I see them almost reversing the role sometimes. They don't take their work as serious, but they take themselves very serious and their own self-image very seriously. So that's really helped me as I've gone through. It's also helped me be very relaxed in a lot of social situations where maybe I'm dealing with a lot of type A-list celebrities and some of the high-end combat groups that I've had to work with, which a lot of people get intimidated by. And I think because I'm there to share material, I'm not there to, from my personal standpoint, when I walk into a room, I'm not there for people to be impressed with Tim Larkin. I'm there to share information, give them something that's going to help them give a good takeaway. But as far as myself, I'm very realistic about who I am and that I'm a very flawed human. And, I can laugh at myself. And I just think a lot of people have a hard time, especially when you're younger, in your younger years, you have a much harder time of taking that approach to life.
I really like that. I like that you walk into a room and you're not judging others or stacking yourself up against other people. You're just there to offer value, simply that, and get people the results that they're looking for.
Yeah.
I really like that. And now, Tim, what's exciting you today? What are you working on now? Any current projects that you would like to share with us?
For me, it's a couple of things. I mean, I've got, I'm recently kind of a new dad in the last couple of years. I've got twin daughters and I've got a 4-year-old, and those guys just are hilarious. I mean, I just have a great time watching them develop and do that. And so on my personal side, I've got a really great, family dynamic that I'm very much enjoying. As challenging as it is having little kids, it's really a lot of fun. Professionally, I've never been more excited. I'm signing up for my next book deal has come through, and I'm really excited about the context of that book that I'm going to be writing in the next year, which is just really going to be cool. And then we're launching our virtual training center, which really allows me to reach a lot of my international clients and people that can't necessarily train with us all the time, and provide them access to not only myself, but all of my top instructors. So there's no degradation in the quality of the instruction that they give. Technology now is allowing us to do this distance learning, which is just amazing. It's incredible. And, just sharing the content and being able to provide live streaming Q&A sessions with my clients and, do mini seminars for them and literally know that I've got people from every continent watching in on us. It's just amazing to me. And so that's really, really exciting. And that's probably the next stage of really developing the target focused training community.
Wow, yeah, that's got to be really exciting. Just really expanding your information to, like global, make it so everyone can get to you, regardless of where you are. So that's really exciting. But how can my audience follow up with you? What's the best website?
Yeah, probably the best one for them to go to is right to, targetfocustraining.com. It's all one word. And really the best thing they should do, there's a lot of information there free, but I always found if they start off and they just, give me their email address. And again, we don't spam people. We don't give them a lot of other stuff. I provide a lot of really good free content to people. And if you have an interest in self-protection or self-defense, I would highly recommend that you just get as much, free content as possible at first and really just get yourself as much of a knowledge base, because, there's just a lot of people out there in the industry that are just really about the immediate sale and getting you to buy their products right away, not necessarily asking the right questions of whether or not this approach works for you. Because, especially when it comes to self-protection, it's your life. I'm not going to be there when it happens to you. So I might think that I have the best skill sets and training out there, which obviously I do. But if it doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't matter. This is your personal situation. I'm not selling widgets. I want you to be comfortable with my approach. I want you to say, yeah, this is what I want. And that's why I provide so much free content before I'd ever ask you to maybe purchase something from me.
All right. So targetfocustraining.com. And I remember, earlier I talked about how you got banned from the UK. So just briefly, what's going on there?
Well, it's a situation that, there's a larger backstory to myself and the Minister of Parliament that brought the claim against me. But essentially, what happened was there were riots that happened in the UK. I have been there for 20 plus years training in the UK, trained the military, law enforcement community. I went there as a student. I went to University of London for a year when I was a college student. So I've had a long history in the UK. No criminal incidences, not even a parking ticket over there. And like I said, I've worked at the highest levels of the government. I made comments because I do a lot of press over there after. And basically I was asked by a variety of people, via BBC, The Times, a lot of very legitimate news outlets about, the riots. And I basically said, yes, people are facing grievous bodily harm. The self-defense laws in Britain are such that people are afraid to take action because they're afraid they're going to be prosecuted, the way the self-defense laws are written. And yet they're facing a situation where there are no first responders. There are no cops to protect them. There's nobody there to take action for them. So they have to take action for themselves. And so I said, this is a perfect example of the situation where the self-defense laws really need to be taken a look at, because, these people are scared to death to protect themselves, and they're facing basically people that want to do murder to them. And so we went through, and it's a very sober type of thing. The last question I was asked in the BBC interview was, hey, we know you have a lot of clients over here. We know you come over here a couple times a year. Are you planning on visiting any of the riot affected areas when you come here? Have any of your clients reached out to you? And I said, yeah, actually, a couple of them have reached out to me, and they want to show me where they were when the riots happened and how they were able to recognize. The main thing that one of the big tenets I teach in target focused training is how to recognize asocial violence, how to recognize the cues before it actually happens. And what the people wanted to tell me was, hey, here's where I was. Here's where I was when this hit. I recognized A, B, and C, and I got myself out of there. So basically, my clients were trying to tell me that, hey, thank you so much. These are cues that I wouldn't have recognized before. I saw it was going bad, and I got myself out of there, and I was safe. That was it. So that was the end of the interview. Everybody reported it legitimately, except for one of the tabloids. It would be kind of like the National Enquirer of the UK, which is the Mirror. And the Mirror writes, Larkin to lead riot tour. Basically, I'm going to go into the riot-affected areas. I'm going to incite vigilantism and tell people to go out and do it. And it was a joke. Everybody thought it was a joke. Well, this one MP sent that to her very good friend who was the Home Secretary. Kind of the Home Secretary is kind of like a Secretary of State, and kind of like it's a very powerful position in the UK. I think like third or fourth in line for power. And the Home Secretary issued a travel ban to me. I was literally going to fly to London, or no, I was going to fly to Birmingham to accept an award at this big, huge martial arts conference. I was going to be the keynote speaker. I was getting an award for self-defense instructor of the year, and I got it presented at the Virgin counter here in McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. They flew a guy 6,000 miles to hand me a letter that said I was banned from traveling to the UK because I was promoting vigilantism. And so, you know, it's other people that have been banned have been Snoop Dogg, it's been Louis Farrakhan, Michael Savage, like all of these guys that either were drug related or political related. And, you know, I'm up there because of my self-protection messages, which were absolutely ridiculous. But I had to wait till this year is the first year I can contend it. And it absolutely has no merit whatsoever. But, you know, it was a knee-jerk reaction after that. But it was amazing how much press that got me. And it was actually a very positive thing for me, even though I've had such a long history with the UK. I have so many great clients over there and friends, and it's been a bummer that I haven't been able to go back to London. But actually everybody's kind of happy on my staff because we've moved all our training over to Paris, and they like Paris better than London anyway. So I guess it's a net positive.
Yeah, you know, I read about that online, and I was like, I gotta ask him about this. I gotta get, you know, what's the real story behind this? So sounds like you got to, you know, get that appeal in, and things will probably work out for you there. But, you know, it sounds like this is kind of helping out your brand and getting you more exposure too, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, listen, a lot of times in order to get people to look at your training, you know, sensationalism helps, stories help. And the fact that you've got this, you know, crazy American instructor who got banned from the UK, a lot of people look at that and say, oh my God, this stuff must be amazing. Yeah, and that's it. And the cool part about that is those people that come in, they quickly, once they get my information, they see that, you know, this guy's a very sane, sober individual. My stuff is very direct. Listen, I absolutely teach people that there's the possibility that you may have to use lethal force to protect yourself in a grievous bodily harm situation. But I'm also the big part of my training is to help people navigate all the areas where they may be putting themselves in for potentiality for violence, that they just need behavioral changes to make sure that they minimize the chance of violence ever entering their lives, which is, you know, the main goal of my training is to make sure that you never have to use the physical application of my training. Well,
I mean, it kind of is how I got you on the show. Ryan Holiday just sent me an email, and he's like, hey, Tim Larkins got banned from the UK. You know, he's probably a good fit for your show. You know, you might like him.
That's typical. That's typical Ryan, man. It's pretty funny.
All right. So, Tim, you know, it's been a pleasure having you be on the show and sharing your story and life lessons here. And you really kind of were vulnerable in the beginning of the show, and you just continued to deliver value throughout this entire episode. A little bit longer, but, you know, I'm learning, you know, I got so much out of this episode here, and I know my audience did too. So thanks again.
Hey, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to share some insights with the audience. And please, if you get any follow-up questions or anything, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions for any of your people.
All right, and that's going to wrap up episode 113 with Tim Larkins.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast show. It's been a pleasure having you be a part of a thriving community of men who want to crush it in all aspects of life. I'm on a mission here to inspire millions of guys, and with your help, we're going to make a dent in the universe. Check out knowledgeformen.com for a ton of free content that's designed to help you live a remarkable life. Again, that's knowledgeformen.com. I hope to see you there. And always remember, 2014 is the official year of the crush, where we take action to get the life we've always dreamed of. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and until next time, let's do it.